Okay. Just let me know when I have to start presenting.
Yeah, I will make a little bit of. Okay, I am recording now, so welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us today, and this is the third portfolio series that we've been organizing so far, and we've got with us today Ausra. And she's graduated in Middlesex. What was it, 3 years ago?
I think so.
I think so. 2 years ago. And because since then, she did a master at the RCA. She's going to kind of touch upon later on. And she's currently working in a practice in London. It's really strange. Last time we saw Ausra was pretty same time as now, and we had a really nice talk with a lot of questions, a lot of students, and then she joined us for the last ever review that we had in the studio, in which we had a lot of little models, and at that time we couldn't really imagine that in I think a couple of weeks, everything would have been stuck. Yeah. And so I remember we did exchange a couple of emails like, oh my God, what happened? And that was last time. And we are really happy to have her back again today. As you will see, she will go through her final portfolio because this is, kind of the core thing that I'm sure you want to see. And then she's going to touch upon, other things that she's been doing since. And you will see, comparing to the first two portfolio talk that we had, and also comparing to the next one, Ausra work, it's very peculiar, and even the premises of the work that she will explain are very, very specific, because she's got kind of a really strong narrative context that is supporting the choices that she did. And even in terms of, let's say, the linguistic and communication choice that she made, I think her work is very original. So I'm sure you're going to be interested even in how she did things. And Ausra, this year, students they can choose in between a couple of pathways. So they will need to submit all the materials that you have submitted. But on top of that, they can actually choose if they want to add a video pathway. So if they want to, as I was mentioning before, produce a little video, or if they want to go down to the digital fabrication pathway. We are not sure yet. We will be able to access, the workshop in any way, but we can still send files, and control the 3D printer, for example. And I think that will be really useful to look at your 3D printed outcomes. That has been one of the I think most interesting that we produced in the last few years, as something that they might consider in terms of scale and in terms of system itself. Okay, so welcome and thanks a lot for being with us once again. And Ausra, she will also join us in the next design review for one day, correct?
Yeah, like in a month time, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So you will see her again. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Francesca, for such a thorough presentation and introduction. And so I'll start sharing my screen, and let me just know if you cannot see something. Okay. Is it okay? Can you see?
Yes.
Okay, so as Francesca introduced, I will just, in the first part of the presentation, I will go through my final project review that has been done in Middlesex while I was graduating, and we'll show you the portfolio. We'll explain a little bit the structure, and then to finish off the presentation, I will talk about what I've done following the graduation at Middlesex and what I'm doing now. So going on to the project, I will explain you, I think it's important to just give a little bit like background to the project before I go into the portfolio, speaking about the portfolio. So at that time, we were doing a project in it was the place was location was Wood Green, and the building that we were working on was Alexandra Palace. So it was the first point of research, and I started doing the research of the area. And what I came to realization at that point, that there were quite a lot of issues with domestic abuse, because many of the centers, many of the retreat centers were actually being closed, these kind of psychological support. And as in many of these cases of domestic abuse, of course, women usually in 95% of the cases is the one suffering the most, as statistics says. So I decided to concentrate on my demographics was women of the area, and I decided to make a retreat for women suffering from domestic abuse. And the thing was, I think for me important was the fact that the project doesn't become really mundane. So how many women in the area, how many square meters I have to dedicate for them, and so on and so forth. So I really wanted to go and do the project somehow slightly differently. So I said, and somehow at that point, I remembered actually the book that I was reading, and the book which was inspiration for the project was called Women Who Run with the Wolves, written by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. And it's actually a collection of different fairy tales. And this book is analyzing the portrait of a woman through all these different fairy tales. So I decided to choose one of the fairy tales that actually talks about this kind of problematic situation in a woman's life when she's going through hardship, something similar to domestic abuse, and she has this division of the personality and so on. The name of the tale is Sealskin, Soulskin. Who's interested, I really highly recommend to read this book. It's quite fascinating and really interesting. And so I took this fairy tale as point of departure, and I kept on reading and interpreting different symbols found in it. And for me, it was really important to distill from this tale the key concept, which was actually dichotomy of the personality and division. So these are my very initial models, that very simplistic ones. I took a piece of foam and I started like cutting them through, just thinking about the concept and thinking about potentially coming through architectural shapes. Going from there, I went into a lot of sketching, other model making. I was taking some reference projects and then resketching them, thinking about this key overarching concept, which was division and division of personality, etc. Went to different exhibitions. At that time, there was in Tate Modern, I think, exhibition of Picasso and his take on women in his art. So I went to that exhibition and then started sketching. And I think just to say on that part that it's really important to look at not only at architectural or interior references while you think about your project, but as well into really kind of different means of inspiration that not necessarily directly connected to your project. So for example, it could be an exhibition. And then at some point I had to approach finally this Alexandra Palace that, to be honest, was quite scary. It is a huge building. And my first approach to it, I said, okay, so what do I do with it? So I started like sectioning into different parts and thinking about my potential shelter, how it's going to be. So what functions I want to include into that space. So I was thinking about shelter for the woman, so like some sleeping space, potential idleness, some movement that they will have to do, some meditation, nature, and some creative activities in order to heal. So it started becoming like a journey through the space. And all these separate functions then consolidated themselves into three basic areas. That was shelter, which I decided to do in this tower. Then this transitional area, which was a bridge in my case. and this other selection of rooms that I called initiation chambers, and it was more than one of them. But I think these ones, two areas were quite straightforward. And then when I started thinking about initiation chambers and how I want to lay them out, it was really a massive bottleneck for me, and I didn't know what to do, where to start. Because you have already existing layout of the building, and I looked into different references, and I think for me the opening of the design process of that area was when I came across this project, Lobberhaus by Petzo von Elrichhausen, and I highly recommend you to look through their projects. They are very simple, but at the same time very interesting. I kind of thought, well, this is it. This is the beginning of my project. It's going to be the staircase going down, and then it will start leading into different rooms and so-called called by me initiation chambers. So this is the this corridor in plan, and from there on, from that very simple reference that I took and then interpreted, and all other spaces kind of spiraled out. And I think one of the important things was to just actually number them, and wherever I was going, I was giving a number, reference number, because all these spaces was like overlapping and then intersecting with each other. So just for the clarity of somebody who was overviewing the project, it was really important to have all these references and really clear list of those spaces that I was designing. And then when I decided this top layout, I started going into the design process of very specific each space. So again, model making was a really important part of it. And then looking at different references. And again, just to emphasize, if you look at this one part of the project, everything became somehow metaphorical. So let's say this part of the project was called Intentional Solitude Chamber. And I interpreted these names that I was giving these for these spaces, and because my starting point was a tale, a fairy tale, I didn't want my project to become really realistic. And if you look at this, for example, I was interpreting these words like intentional and solitude. So what does it mean, solitude, for a human being? So probably being in some enclosed space, and intentional means that you have to have a journey and to arrive. So this element had to have these parts in it. So my arrival was a ladder, and if I remember correctly, it was around 10 meters height, which is of course not realistic in the real project, but in my project, because it was based on tale and everything was metaphorical, it was okay. And so I was inviting that human being to climb that ladder and basically find themselves in this kind of enclosed space where they can be alone and not basically nobody else could arrive there. So that was the design process. I was interpreting all those symbols that I was finding in the tale. And another really important part was the writing in my project. So this is one of the inspirational images where the painting actually is described by somebody else, not the painter themselves. So it was one of the references given by my tutors at the time. And that writing process I found really interesting, because when you write, you describe the spaces without having visual cues. So in my design process, sometimes I was designing the space and then describing them, but sometimes it started with a description of the space, and then I was designing, because I think like it's the beauty of the books when you can imagine whatever you really like while you read, but as soon as you are given a visual cue, almost your imagination stops at that point, and you kind of cannot get over that visual cue that you were already given. So for me, that double process of designing and writing, and then or vice versa, writing and designing was really important, and it was a really massively great aid. And if somebody likes writing, I really highly recommend to try to do this process for even a small part of the project. So I was designing these so-called chambers in this way. I was giving them the names, and then I was extracting a small part of the from the book, from the fairy tale of my choice, and then describing this space in my own words. So I produced 6 of them. And just to say a couple of words about these visuals, you might ask why they are black and white. And it was really kind of conscious decision how I approached my visual making. Because again, my reference point was a book and a fairy tale. I really wanted my visuals to look as if they are illustrations in a book. Also, a font became an important part, because at the beginning I was really not paying attention to it. I chose whatever font I thought it's okay. But one of my tutors said at that point, said, "Ausra, what font are you using for your project?" And I was like, "And what does it really matter?" And he said, "Try to use Crimson. It's a font used for actually printing the classical books." And when I kind of followed this advice, actually that font and the text, because it was important part of the project and the design process, it became like a glue in all my overall presentation of the project, also the portfolio. And another probably point to make about these visuals, at the time I remember I refused very strongly to Francesca to use any of the basically people, and I said I'm not going to use any people in my visuals, because they're going to make these visuals mundane, and that's what I wanted to avoid, not to make my visuals. I didn't want them to look like as everyday pieces. But I think if you ever choose not to put people in your visuals, I think it's really important still to include some cues to the human habitation. So for example, in this visual could have been a pair of shoes, maybe here, maybe a coat hanging at a doorway, maybe here a book. So it gives these clues that the human being was there, and actually the spaces are used by human beings, because actually we design for people, no? And here is the overall section of my overall project. Again, because of all this kind of intrinsic spaces overlapping between themselves, I had to do this list. And maybe at this point, it's quite good to go into my portfolio, just to give you a little bit like overview of the structure and explain how I approached it. So I will go into a different document. Bear with me. So this is my portfolio, and I believe that your tutors will share with you. So I'll just give you a quick overview of the overall portfolio. So I started with a project brief, area research, the summary of it, the problems that I found, then went into describing my project aim, my objectives, and also project methodology, stating that it's translation project from a written text into architectural spaces, and I gave the reference of the fairy tale that I read and I was referencing throughout all the project. These are my initial models and concept development, then going into the design development. So basically explaining and laying out all my design process, going into the overall plan, and again, like listing all these different spaces. So it's really clear for the viewer and the reader of the portfolio what they are looking at and what they are referencing. And this is the main section, and then I started like cutting the space into smaller sections and the smaller side. This is the axonometric projection of overall space that gives like really detailed and separate overview of the overall project of the separate elements. And then I went, because I had so many elements, probably 10 of them, I kind of felt it was really important to describe each of them and kind of give almost a zoom in moment for each of them. So for example, it's the shelter element. So it's a section and zoomed in plans of the shelter, and each of the section was given like a text explanation, which consisted of structure, symbolism, and materiality. So I was given this explanation to all of my sections. So I was starting a new description of explanation of a new element with my visual, the text that I wrote, that I've written, and then again explanation on structure, symbolism, and materiality. And then in this case, I thought it was more appropriate to use the elevations, and then also basically in this case the axonometric projection of the bridge. It's another element that for this one I chose just the section and zoomed in plan, but you still have this explanatory text above. And for this one, because it was even more intrinsic, I decided to have like exploded axonometric projection of this element, because in none of the other visuals or drawings you could see that, for example, there is a staircase wrapping around. So this one gives you like really good and detailed overview of the element inside it. So really depending on the element that I was explaining, I was making a decision what to include, either a plan, either axonometric projection, either section, either elevation, or even a detail. So probably you will see this, you will have more time to look through all these elements if you will have the access to the portfolio. And I think I've finished with my materials and the overall model, which actually also, just talking a little bit in more details about the model, I decided not to do basically full representation of the space or produce all the model, but I decided to just do small elements of the space, because just to put emphasis how they were done. And the other thing that for me it was important, I really wanted to try 3D printing. So like if you have the access at your university at the moment, I really encourage you to try as many new things as you possibly can, because it's always something that you can put in your bucket of knowledge and skills. So coming back to the previous document, so this is the final assembled model, which I've done on very simple plywood, and this is my final presentation. At the time it was a physical exhibition in Truman Brewery exhibition space. And just to give you like a couple of words about that, I think it's really important to think about all the details, and as well to allow enough time whenever you're doing physical presentation, and probably when you will be working in the practices, if you work on the exhibitions, just to allow the time for testing and trialing. So for example, even the paper choice is important. So I think I was buying like 3 different papers, printing on them and seeing like whether the text reads clear or my visuals, they are correctly printed. Then when I went to the printer, I had some other issues with the print quality to start with, because these visuals were coming out like somehow a little bit bluish and green, so they were not as near to that as you can see in the final printed sheet. So I think this is really important to consider when you're planning for if you are kind of doing your final presentation with so many elements like printed text, or kind of these posters, bound portfolio, your model, materials board, etc. That all these steps, they take time, and usually to make them and get them right takes time to develop all the details. So this is, I think, it on my portfolio and my work in Middlesex. And after I finished and graduated from Middlesex University in interior architecture, I went on studying a master's in Royal College of Art. And I will give you just a quick presentation on what I have done throughout a couple of years there. So my first year project was in a studio that was studying ambiguous architecture, and in that particular year I chose to investigate a circular form and appropriation of circular interior space and inhabitation of the spaces in between the circles. So I produced, as a response to the brief, a space that was basically done only from the circular roof, or circular wall, and so on and so forth. And just to give you a little bit like of technique that was done, because the studio was working on teaching us to use one of the really important engines, and probably like because all our presentations going more and more digital, less and less physical, I think it's quite an interesting and quite an important tool. You might notice that it's quite photorealistic images, and all these images were produced in so-called Unreal Engine, which is a tool used usually for the game industry production, for producing games, but more and more interior and architecture companies used to use this tool to model in it, to go and have the effect of real-time rendering, which actually produces these quite realistic images, almost like photographic images. So, and this tool was really important to learn in the first year, because the next year, due to pandemics, we didn't have a possibility to actually produce anything physical. And this tool, the Unreal Engine, became one of my key tools to present my final project. And I will show you then afterwards a couple of videos where you will see the tool in action. Another project that I have done at RCA, it was for the media, so-called media studies, and probably where it was the first moment that allowed me to think about my final year project. And these casts were produced in collaboration with one Lithuanian architect. I'm Lithuanian, so I collaborated with somebody from my country, and he kindly gave me these old windows and door handles that he's collecting from demolished traditional Lithuanian homes that are being demolished still now. So I started looking with this project into this topic of memory and immobilizing memory through certain means, and connecting with this event in Lithuanian history that happened after the Second World War, when a lot of traditional architecture was destroyed because of the eviction of people and due to the occupation. So this work was just a start. I made this cast, then I wrote a dissertation, and then finally in the final year I did this project, which was called Walking the Forgotten. And in principle, it talks about the themes of memory and societal trauma in Lithuania, when during the Soviet occupation, a large portion of population were intentionally displaced with the aim of changing the pre-existing society and traditional culture. So I decided to approach to make a response to it. I did an incredible research, and I interviewed all my relatives and some members of the public that still remember this trauma, because bear in mind it was happening in 1945, just after the end of the war, when Lithuania was occupied. And I basically decided that it's going to be a response in terms of a journey through that prohibited landscape, and encounter with these landmarks that talk about certain private and collective memories. And this is one of the responses. I made 3 of them. So this is one, and this is the other 2. And it was really important to basically show somehow that walk, that being in the space. So actually, my final work was in a form of film. So it was a blender of animation, which was done in Unreal Engine. It was a blend of interviews of the people, also some collages that I've done, and some materiality research that I have done throughout my project. And just talking a little bit about materiality, because in the video that I will show, you will see some kneading of the dough. And through these experiments, I tried to bring these domestic tools and textures into the architecture and almost make it ethereal trace and the memory into the home. Hopefully I explain myself, but if somebody is interested, there is a link to the overall project where you can see all the videos and the research and a little bit more explanation about it. And probably I will try to show you a video. We did a test, so actually the sound is not great and probably you cannot hear anything, but bear in mind most of it is in a foreign language, so it's important to read the subtitles, and you will see maybe it's good just to see overall how different mediums are connected together and how they work with each other. So I will just go into the website and I will play one of the videos that is related to this image. So this was one of the videos that I produced in relation to this image, and then if you are interested, you can have a look at the other 2, which is on the website. So that's in summary my RC experience, and just very quickly what I'm doing at the moment. When I completed my RC studies, just happened that one of my tutors said, who is looking for a job? And I said, I am looking for a job. And I went into to the interview with some architects that have their architecture studio in London, and it happened that they hired me. So I started pretty much working straight after my studies, and I work for this company called IDK, which is based in London. It's a small young studio, but really dynamic, really nice people, and we have a fortune. I think it's really fortunate to have a really amazing project, and especially really amazing clients. So I'll just give you overview of top line overview of one of the projects that we are working at the moment, which is based in Cumbria, not very far from Lake District. So very quickly about this project, and apologies, I cannot share with you much more detailed information. This is the information that is available on the website. So you also, if you're interested, you can have a look on what they're doing, but just give you the sense of the practice and what we are doing. So this is the location of the project in Milam. This is town next to Lake District, and this is the project location, how it looks at the moment from satellite view. And this is the aspired project master plan. So basically, this is a spiritual retreat. Interestingly enough, it's kind of continuation from my Middlesex project. And it's actually really interesting because it's a mixture of new buildings and some restoration, some buildings that are going to be restored from the current state into a new state. So as you can see, it's not only a project that is in connection to the built environment or architecture interiors, but also it's a development of the landscape. And another really interesting part of this project is that it's sitting just very close to the national park. And it's actually the location and the area of the project is, I have to read because I never remember, it's called the site of special scientific interest, meaning that there are, like while you're developing, there are quite a lot of ecology constraints. And as if it's not enough, we also have some species that are protected in the area, and it's called, they are called netherjack toads. So we also have to take into consideration while we're doing our build project. So in principle, it's not only about what we are going to build, but actually how this built environment is going to integrate itself into what we have at the moment. So I'll show you a couple of pieces, some proposed interiors and a little bit more details about several of these buildings because they are quite diverse. So one of them is the so-called octagon. And again, just to point out that it's sitting in the nature, is trying to blend with the nature rather than stick out from it. And I think it's really beautiful part of this project is this natural stone cladding, which again talks to the natural surrounding of the area. The other building is that mentioned one, the restoration project from industrial architecture, which is kind of quite an old building sitting there, but it's in quite a poor state at the moment. It was built and rebuilt, some pieces omitted, some added. So the overall concept of this building actually to accentuate that part of this addition, and then the building becomes even taller with some extension on the roof and then side extension as well. And this is one of the interior views of that top part, which is going to be, I think, like a social space, meeting space. The other building, a so-called ancillary building, which serves as a kitchenette and changing places next to the octagon. And as you can see, it's actually tucked in the landscape and it's basically sitting almost in the land. So again, the architecture is blending in the surrounding and it's talking really nicely with its where it's going to be built. And the last piece, these are the residences, these kind of enclosures where a person can meditate and completely be isolated from the surrounding world. So I think this is the last slide. Thank you very much for your attention. And hopefully it was not too long.
Thank you so much. How fantastic space this is. Would be really great to go and visit maybe one day. Hi, Tom. So thank you so much, Ausra. That was absolutely lovely. I think you've touched on so many interesting things, and I think we really appreciated the focus that you made about the process that you went through, and and the up and downs, and how you sometimes get into a bottleneck. That's what you mentioned, and how you try to find strategies to design using different tools, and this idea of writing and designing and writing and designing. I think it's really interesting and has worked really well in your case as well. So hopefully we can have some questions, as I mentioned before, because year 2 and year 1s are guests. They're not going to be able to access the chat, but you need to raise your hand and we'll see you. Or you just need to switch on your camera and ask a question to Ausra. Everything, well, not everything, but her portfolio, it is shared in the year 3 exemplar folder. So if you want to have a closer look to the drawings, that's really worth doing. So everything is there. Cindy.
Hi. I really like what you did with the 6 chambers. May I know how did you come up with the interesting? You have like different names for different chambers. So how did you come up with that story? And I saw like answers to describe that which I didn't manage to finish reading. But were those all inspired from the exhibition?
It's a little bit breaking. I don't know, Francesca, did you hear better the question? Is it the question? Yeah, go ahead.
Oh,
no,
okay.
it wasn't. Cindy, sorry, the audio wasn't great.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. Now it's better, maybe.
Okay. Yeah, so it's related to the 6 chambers. How did you come up with such interesting programs for your build?
Okay, yes, so it was quite a process, I think, because I really didn't know what to do at the beginning. And the only one thing that I had was basically the book, the tale, and analysis of the tale. And I think I read that analysis and that tale probably, I don't know, 50 times, searching for what it is that's happening psychologically and what it is the remedy for that psychological issue. Another thing that I did, not reading only my referenced tale or my inspiration, the tale that actually was my concept, but as well, I remember Naomi and Francesca gave me a list of different books of similar type, of similar interpretations, and one of them, which I remember reading and which left me like incredible impression, and since then became one of my favorite writers, was Italo Calvino, Invisible Cities, that's correct. And it's just incredible, imaginative tale about one city, which is Venice, if I remember correctly, and kind of description from different perspectives. So I think for me, it was just like interpreting that read information. And again, as I said, if you noticed in the presentation that the text is so incredible because it's not a visual cue, and then you can imagine whatever you like. So for me, reading was a key inspiration, and that what actually was giving me the ideas. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah,
and I think I was right if I do remember, it was also a matter of identifying some specific words that could, that were really kind of representing the feelings and the behavior, the feelings more than behaviors of, let's say the user, but at the same time they could have been used to describe the atmosphere of the space itself.
Exactly. So like, I don't know, could be utter silence chamber. So what does that mean, utter silence? And then you start interpreting these. So what's important, right? It's solitude is important. So what the space that kind of gives you the solitude? What's the space? What gives you complete silence? Does it mean that it has, I don't know, half a meter thick walls, or it's kind of completely covered in an acoustic material that you cannot hear anything from outside, and so on and so forth. So I think, yes, you're right, Francesca. It was also like a really key moment to distill these keywords that gave me the idea for the spaces.
And I think that's very useful because year 3 are now in the process. Well, they are nearly done, let's say. But this is really what they are trying to do, to translate ideas and, you know, aims into spatial features. So you've got to, suddenly you've got an idea what you design, and they've got a narrative, all of them. They've got a really good, strong narrative underpinning it. But of course, then there is this really interesting process in which you kind of translate those aims into actual spaces, and you really need those spaces to work for, you know, your features. And that's you know, that might be a good way of doing it, just like identifying keywords and try to see if they can work both ways somehow. Hasn't got to be a question, can also be you know, a comment. Rumeza, you had your hand up, but then you've changed your mind.
Hello.
I had a question. You know, for the like little video you made at the end, was that Cinema 4D, like the program you used?
No, it was Unreal Engine. It's the engine that is actually free. You can download it freely, and in principle, it's an incredible tool. It has a little bit like of learning curve at the beginning, but as soon as you get a grip of how you navigate the space, how you build, in principle, you can build a model and in SketchUp or Rhino, and then import it into the Unreal Engine. And then you apply the materials, and here you go. It's a really incredible and really powerful tool, and I highly recommend you trying it. If not, you know, making it your final representation method, but you can try it, and maybe some parts could work, or like even like a small part, you know.
Where do you import it from?
It's called Unreal Engine, and if you Google it, you will just download the software, and you can find a lot of tutorials how to work with it.
Is it only Rhino and SketchUp you can import from?
I worked with Rhino and SketchUp, so you model in Rhino and SketchUp, and then you import your models into the Unreal Engine. I worked with those ones. I don't know what other softwares work with it.
Okay. I'm just looking.
Yeah, I've Googled it. Yes, there is, you know, a homepage you can have a go. I'm sure you can import probably whatever 3D throwing into it, because it's a rendering engine.
Exactly, correct.
Yeki.
Hello, Professor. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? I really like your project and your wonderful presentation, and I just quickly you have can you hear me? So I'm not sure my.
Yes, we can't hear you so well. We hear kind of a sort of voice bouncing back.
Okay.
Maybe you can maybe the volume down from your computer. That will.
Maybe I can write here because I think my microphone doesn't work at this moment.
But now it's fine.
Now it's fine. Okay, wonderful. So I would like to say I like your project, like your presentation, and one of your work is that work and the village, and that work. Let me think about the Carlos Talpa, and which is an Italian architect in the Modernissimo. I'm not sure if you know him, and I think your work is really behind your work. Each work is a very beautiful and the deep story. I think your thinking is so deep, and yes, I appreciate your works. and I just quickly saw your website CV, and I know you just graduated from the MDX and moved to the RCA. So because my work focuses on the spatial design education, so my question is about the education. And you has been in Middlesex for 3 years and in RCA more or less 2 years, I'm not sure. So my question is that have you do some real project in your student camera for your bachelor and the master? Do you really do some real project and not just some render work or the paper works? So that's my question.
The question is, did I do any real work?
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
at the moment, I was at the moment I'm working in architecture studio, and yes, I'm doing some real work.
No, but he means in the educational.
In educational. I think when I was at RCA already, I did like one of my it was a pilot project. I don't have it. I didn't show you, but it was a real project that I've done for my friend who runs a bicycle store in London in Euston. It was super budget project. It was £35,000, I think. So pretty much we had just money for materials and joinery work. So I've done all that space. So it was really interesting experience how you deal with the construction people, how you choose materials, how you deal with a client. Although it was my work, my friend, but it was also like this client design experience. Yeah, so it was like super small project, but it was really a valuable experience, I think.
Okay. So I think maybe it's a question for the contemporary spatial design education, not just for the Middlesex and RCA, also for the Politecnico di Milano. And I feel a lot of students, when they graduate from school for the master or the bachelor, and actually they go to a studio to do some internship, and they maybe they're missing some real skills about to build something. That's what I really wonder, and I'm thinking about this, because in traditional, maybe we can think about this question maybe from China. We don't have architecture this job. We don't have the architecture education or the spatial design education, but we have a lot of graphical men. But they always do something by their hands. I know the Professor John Dewey from United States, and one of his important idea is learning by doing. So when you do something, think about something, use your hand to realize that, and learning by doing, step by step. I think maybe it could be an idea for contemporary spatial design education. This is just my idea. It's kind of discussion, not quite, but I like your work. It's very good.
Thank you. Just to comment, I think this experience, the practical experience, is really, really important. And now, like, I'm working in the practice. Before I worked for interior design practice, so it was a slightly different experience. Before actually I joined Middlesex, by the way. But yes, and to be honest, like, I feel even if I finished, RCA and so on, the school will never teach you certain skills. And to be honest, like, especially in architectural practice, you learn so much on the job, and like in terms of materiality, in terms of making, in terms of really like dealing with contractors that non-university would teach you, So I think if there is a possibility, probably in between bachelor's and master's, it's a good practice to have a year or a couple of years of experience, even to decide whether you really want to take a further course of your education, and in which direction, I think. So in my case, was probably like one after another, but just because that was my route, because I did completely different experience beforehand, because I was a project manager. So I had this kind of rush a little bit to finish my second education. But definitely, if somebody is just finishing school at the moment, bachelor's in interior design architecture or interior architecture is the first degree, I highly recommend to do this practice, because you get like invaluable skills, and also your approach to the project, how you think will be completely different. On the other side, the downside of it might be that probably you would never do a project with initiation chambers. But you know, it's the beauty. I think it's also the beauty of education that allow yourself to dream, because in the real world you would not have the possibility unless you have incredibly you know, affluent client with you know, a massive time frame and so on and so forth. So just enjoy it and just push your imagination to the edge.
Yes,
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, you enjoying your student life. Yeah.
Ausra, Yaki is it's a PhD student, and he's doing a PhD in Milano. He's now exchange in Middlesex, you know, in this kind of being in China, and is doing research about interior education. So that's why he's been focusing. But it's been really, it's a really interesting debate that I think we can all be here for hours and, you know, trying to, you know, decide, you know, which is the role of practice and university and Myanmar, that we can go on forever and ever, I think. But it would be really, really good, you know, to keep on talking about these things. But for today, I think we need to wrap it up. And if there is no other question, we need to thank you again, once again, Ausra. It's been really nice to have you back. And we'll see you very soon, actually. So, you know, maybe you might have some new questions by the time we're going to see you at reviews in a month's time or something.
Super.
Okay, so...
Ausra, thank you so much. It was lovely to see you.
Thank you so much.
It's always fascinating to hear you talk about your project. I still love it.
Thank you so much. Thanks for inviting. Really a pleasure. Thank you. Have a nice day.
You too. Bye. I'm going to